And I think when a company makes a decision to provide education like this for their employees, it's really saying, you know what, guys, hey, I care about you.
Mm.
And I know that we work in a stressful environment and it's probably always going to be this way. How can I equip you guys with the tools and the skills that you need to be able to overcome some of these challenges that we're faced with?
Today's guest is certified mindfulness meditation facilitator. She is keynote speaker and founder of Stacy Conlon Meditation. Please welcome to the show, Stacy Conlon. Hello, Stacy. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Hi, Jens. I'm doing great. How are you?
Fantastic. I mean, it's evening for me, it's morning for you.
Mm.
So first question before we go into the official part, how do you get out of bed as a meditation and mindfulness teacher? I have heard a lot of things how other people do that, but if I have a professional on the call, I would love to hear how you do that.
Sure. No, great question. I'd love to answer. And it looks so different now than it used to before. Now how it looks is, first thing is I have an old school alarm clock. So I do not use my iPhone and I don't have any electronics actually in the room itself. I notice if it's in there, then I'm looking at it and I just keep it in the other room so I'm not even tempted. It used to be, and I'll just tell a quick story. I used to wake up in the morning with my iPhone, like I know so many of us do. And I had clients that worked a lot on the East Coast. So I'm in California. So if I'm waking up at 6 a.m., my clients on the East Coast have already been up for 3 hours. And so my alarm would go off and then I would go straight to my email and I would just see what was going on. I wanted to connect. And I would see all the things, the requests, the things I needed to do. And it launched me into this just super busy, reactive morning. And over time, I noticed how reactive I was throughout my day, how much of a shorter temper that I felt that I had. And I didn't even realize that what part of that was related to how I was starting my morning. I read an article, the first 30 minutes in the morning is when our subconscious minds are the most impressionable. So that was a big aha moment for me. And I thought, oh my gosh, I better think a bit differently about how I spend these first 30 minutes. So the hack for me now is don't even have the phone in the room. I have an old school alarm clock and I'm so picky because I don't want a bright light and I want the sound of birds waking me up. And believe it or not, I found that type of an alarm clock. So now I wake up to the birds, right? So I wake up and the first thing I do is I go into the kitchen and I pour a glass of warm lemon water. So half a lemon with some apple cider vinegar and a sprinkle of salt. Yeah. And that elixir in the morning, there's so much research that shows around the health benefits of all of those items in your system. And essentially what it does is it wakes up your body. You've been sleeping for 7 or 8 hours and you're dehydrated. So it's a great way to get you some vitamins, some minerals, and wake up and enliven your body. So that's what I do next. Then I take my dog out and I feed her. And then I have a meditation space. It's actually right behind me. And I have a space here that before I check my phone, right? So anything I'm doing in the morning is those first 30 minutes are really sacred. So I'm trying to fill it with things that are inspiring, uplifting, rejuvenating, that sort of thing. So I've got the water. And then I sit down and I generally start with a guided meditation. There are loads out there. You can get them on all kinds of apps. I work with a coach and she provides guided meditations for me specifically. So I like to listen to hers. And those are about 10 or 15 minutes. So I enjoy a guided meditation. And then I actually sit down and do some journaling. So I just kind of set my intention for the day. Sometimes if I have positive wishes or thoughts that I want to send people in my life, healing or prayers, those types of things to send out, I do that. I set down my intention for the day, and sometimes too anything that's on my mind. I often find that just in the course of our given day, we're exposed to energy and people and thoughts and things and emotions. And I want to just let go of those things. So often I'll write down what it is that I just want to release and let go of to make room and space for my intention for the day. So for example, my intention today when I woke up was I want to be present and grounded and open during the day today. And so that helps kind of inform and set the stage for who and how I want to show up. And so then from there, I offer some gratitude and get on with my morning. So then and only then am I allowed to go take a peek at my phone. So generally from there, I go have breakfast and then check my email. So that's what my mornings look like.
It's awesome. It's so different to mine.
Yes, right.
No, I can't say I was as good as you are in that, but I was starting with meditation as well. But since our daughter is born, that's gone. That's no chance. As soon as she's awake,
Yeah.
then it's like, daddy, daddy, daddy. There's no time for, hey, I want to meditate. It's like,
Yes.
And if I would be sitting on the floor, she would be jumping on me. So I've experienced
Yeah, see, I don't have little kids yet. And when that, let's talk in a few years when I do, and maybe we'll have a very different conversation.
Yeah, then you need to switch that to different timings. But I love the fact with the phone in the room. I should be doing that as well because I'm watching way too often.
Yeah, it's a good experiment.
Let's get into the official part now. So
Sure.
we have recorded the unofficial part. Innovation. I mean, before we go into innovation, I would love to hear your story. We know each other a couple of years now, but most probably a lot of listeners have not heard of you, and specifically not have heard of you in what you're doing right now. So tell us a little bit of who you are, what you're doing, and how you became who you are today.
Sure, happy to. So as you mentioned earlier, I'm a certified meditation and mindfulness facilitator, and I have been for about the past 5 or 6 years. I've been practicing mindfulness and meditation for almost 20 years, which is hard to believe. And at the same time, these past 20 years, I've also worked in corporate. I've worked in corporate innovation for the past 5 years as well. So this is something that's very near and dear to my heart, and as is mindfulness and meditation. And maybe I'll share a little bit of my story around how I even came to do this work. This journey for me started in my mid-20s, and I lived in Southern California, and I was newly married, and we had a brand new house, and I had a new job. Everything just seemed like it was perfect, right? And I was working this new job. I was the director of sales and marketing. I had gotten a promotion at a fancy golf club in Southern California. And in working there, I loved my boss, loved my environment, had a great experience. However, I noticed that over time, things just got to be more and more stressful, right? There's more demands, there's more hours. The commute was quite a bit and it became stressful. I remember that I was back in the day was given a BlackBerry. So before the iPhones, right? So it all comes back to the phone and what nemesis they are in our lives. But the BlackBerry, I remember just being tethered and being on all the time for clients. And this was very new. So that work life, separation now started to blend. And I'll never forget, I remember trying to go to sleep at night, and I would have a lot of anxiety. So anxiety was creeping in, and then insomnia really kicked in. And I noticed that when I tried to go to sleep at night, I would just toss and turn, I'd stare at the ceiling, and then I would see on my bedside table, there's my BlackBerry, and that blinking red light from the BlackBerry would go. And of course I had to check my email, and if something unimportant at 3 a.m. So I would take an anti-anxiety medication to make me fall asleep. I'd fall asleep for a couple of hours, maybe 3 or 4, and wake up again the next morning and do it all over again. So this just became over and over and over again, kind of the pattern that I ran into. And, so I'd come home after work. I remember being very irritable, kind of short-tempered. In order to curb that, I'd have some drinks and of course I was young and I wasn't really paying attention to self-care really too much. But I noticed I kind of got into this rhythm of, trying to unwind after work, not being able to, staying up late, taking medication, falling asleep, but then I would go into the cycle. So this really became a downward spiral until one night I remember coming home from work. I really hit rock bottom. I came home from work. I remember tossing my stuff down, making a drink, and sitting down on the couch and just bursting into tears, just my head in my hands, and just thought, this is unsustainable. Like, what happened? I thought I was happy, this great job. Like, what's going on? And it was a really big wake up call for me, because in that moment, I was like, I don't want to be a victim anymore. I don't want to be a victim of my circumstances. And what I started to remember was that, like, I know I can't control what happens around me and the demands and the chaos, but I absolutely can control my reaction to it. How am I showing up? And that was a glimmer of hope. And then I remembered at the same time, I thought, well, what was the time in my life that I was stressed, but I was able to manage it a little bit better? And I remembered a time in college when I practiced mindfulness and meditation and yoga classes as a part of my schoolwork. Actually, I had a class around that. And I thought, oh gosh, that was really helpful. And my aunt had given me a yoga mat a couple of years prior for Christmas. So I ran into the closet and I found it and I rolled out the mat and I started practicing a little bit of stretching and yoga and meditation. And I made a commitment right then and there. And I said, okay, now when I come home from work, even if it's 5 minutes, I'm just going to do this instead of my usual path. So over time, slowly but surely, I created a new habit around this, and my life really started to change. I mean, it was really palpable. So I started to cultivate these tools and these skills around using mindfulness, meditation, yoga, other practices to help support me from the inside out. So then I could show up every day at work, and no matter what was happening, I could better manage those challenges. So for the course of my career, for so many years after, I implemented and practiced many of these tools and techniques, and they've really helped me to the point where it's completely changed my life. I mean, I'm the happiest, healthiest person that I've been, and I'm 41 years old, that I've ever been in my life. And I continue to be that way. And I just thought, okay, a year ago when I left my last company, when I worked for the Lean Startup Company, and I left and thought, well, what's next for me? This is my passion, and helping other people find that sense of peace and calm and equanimity despite the chaos is really something I'm super passionate about. So now I've created a business. I'm just in the very early stages of creating ways for people to help reduce their stress, and specifically professionals in the corporate world, as there's so much that I've learned, and it is just my great passion to help others in similar ways that I have. So, yeah.
Awesome story. It's really interesting, and we know each other a little bit. That this is really an interesting red thread, and I would like to dive more into that, understanding how you see that from an innovation perspective, because that's how we got to know each other. Deep down innovation in large corporations, and of course the startup space, but more from how do you see innovation and innovation from a mindset perspective, and meditation from like how this could unleash, how this could work, how is it working, how is it not working? So what are your opinions on that?
Yes, great question. When I think about innovation, so much of it is a new way of thinking, a new way of acting, a new way of problem solving. It's really around creativity and inspiration. When we're working in innovative capacities, we have to be able to access those parts of ourselves where we're able to be more creative and inspired. And those aren't just things that show up. These are skills that actually can be cultivated. And so, our minds are really good at doing two things, right? They're really good at perseverating on the past, ruminating, playing stories over and over again about things that have happened. And it's also really good about worrying about the future, right? What's going to happen tomorrow or next week or in a year? So the problem with that is that we lose all connection with the present moment, right? So the past is behind us, the future's ahead of us. but we lose touch with what's in the here and now. And in the here and now is where inspiration, where creativity, where all of the things that we want live. Equanimity, peace, joy, all of it, right? So the way that I see that mindfulness and meditation is related to innovation is that as a tool and as a skill, these practices can start to help us get more in touch with that present moment and station ourselves in the here and now, which is where we can tap into those next steps, those ideas, those new ways of working, right? If we're stuck in the past or worrying about the future, we're not able to take steps mindfully in the direction of the innovation that we want to travel.
Yeah.
So those are the ways that I see that they're connected.
Love that. So, I mean, you have been working with large corporations in the past. How do you see the possibility for opening up for this way of thinking in large organizations? How would you help corporations in getting into that?
Yes. One thing that I've noticed that's been so true, whether it's in innovation, mindfulness, and meditation, essentially new ways of working and new ways of thinking and approaching things, it really does start from the top down. It's a culture thing. It's a way of working and being. You know, some of the biggest challenges I faced in working in corporate innovation was I'd often be working with those who were not in a full decision-making capacity. So even though they might have the title or they might have the job description that says that they're able to make these changes or decisions within a company, the truth is they kept falling back or bouncing into these walls that were created within the organization that were even further up the chain. And so it's so interesting because the most senior leaders at a lot of organizations, I mean, the CEOs, the C-suite, in conversations with those folks over the years, what I noticed was they really did, they were visionary, they wanted to see these changes in many cases. There was like this openness to this, but then there was a disconnect then from the next layer down where managers below them were not given full capacity or ability to actually make some of these changes. And there was actually quite a bit of resistance at that level. I remember the wording we often heard too was like the frozen middle in the organization, right? And then below that, of course, are the entrepreneurs who are supposed to be unleashed to be free in the organization to innovate and make these changes. But then there was the stuck middle part. And so what I notice around that too, so it's a cultural piece and some disconnect, but there's also sometimes an older mindset. And change is hard, right? And change takes work. And we often pay lip service to change and we say, oh yeah, let's just change, not a problem. Well, that means you actually have to change. Yeah. And when you have to change, there's a lot of resistance that shows up. And that's true. That's just human nature. But in a large organization, it can just get very complex. And then there's these walls that get hit and things don't shift and move. And there's a lot of like, well, why not? Why is this happening? So it can be very challenging for sure.
So if I would be part of such an organization and think, hey, I've listened to Stacy and I believe she could help us. How would you approach something like this as an external?
Sure. Well, the examples I just provided too were around innovation and change from that perspective. You know, where I sit today is in a little bit of a different capacity, though it's related. So let me see if I can share about that. So today, you know, I'm in a capacity where I go into organizations of all sizes, actually, to help bring about some mindset shifts around how we think about how we work. Stress reduction, and also a way to connect and communicate amongst team members in an organization. So what I notice with this is that when an organization makes a decision to bring in a workshop, say around mindfulness or meditation, or I just taught one on how to ease your stress and anxiety, another one, how to overcome obstacles. I'm teaching one on next week called how to boost your energy and vitality, right? These are all things related. And I think when a company makes a decision to provide education like this for their employees, it's really saying, you know what, guys, hey, I care about you. And I know that we work in a stressful environment and it's probably always going to be this way. How can I equip you guys with the tools and the skills that you need to be able to overcome some of these challenges that we're faced with, right? Because challenges, obstacles, stress, I mean, it's always going to be there. So how are we showing up? What kind of habits are we creating in our lives? What's the perspective that we're looking at things? And how can we shift that to bring more ease into your life? And I think too, another piece that's interesting in my work so far with organizations around this is that leadership, again, similar to the innovation work, the leaders, and really any kind of change, right? Leaders, there has to be a true desire and a passion and like an alignment with these kinds of changes in an organization. And then at the same time, so that's tops down, from the bottoms up, folks who participate, there needs to be an interest or a need. Like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? So how are, if we're equipping people with the tools and skills, those are just mechanisms, right? There has to be some kind of innate desire for that change and to make things better, like kind of getting out of victim mindset, essentially, to actually show up and do the practices, right? I mean, the practice I shared this morning, my 30 minutes, I mean, that took, practice and commitment and habit. Like that didn't just happen overnight. I tweaked it and figured out with what worked for me. And unless and until we start hacking ourselves and what works for us, we may not necessarily get there. So I think in an organization, if there's an openness from leadership and providing some education to say, hey, we care about you, here are some tools and skills, then it's up to you to actually implement those. So there's a kind of a two-sided synergy that needs to happen there. Yeah.
So that's the corporate perspective. How do you see that from a startup, working in smaller business? If you just take myself, I'm working 24/7, or let's say in air quotes 24/7, but far amount more than when I was working in the corporate world. How do you see the difference from building an organization that's enabling that inside an organization where the leadership can basically say, hey, we pay for this and we support you in doing that? How do you work with people where you see they're stressed out, where you might have ideas on how to help them, but they're not ready yet for doing it? So how would you approach that?
Very good question. Well, I think too, I'm definitely not interested in forcing anyone to do anything that they don't feel comfortable with, right? But what I do notice is that, entrepreneurs, really smart people who oftentimes there's the first step of just getting the mind on board, right? Like we need to cognitively understand, like, where's the research? Where are the statistics? We know 83% of workers are stressed in the workplace. Okay, so how is it that, what are the benefits of this type of work? How does mindfulness and meditation, for example, actually help me? What does the research show? What does neuroscience show? So I think the first step too is really getting the mind on board of understanding kind of what are these benefits and how does that work? So maybe I'll just share a little bit about that too, since I find this stuff fascinating. Neuroscience shows us now that our brains can actually change with experience. So for example, say you learn a new language or you want to play a new instrument, right? You can all relate to that. I think about when I grew up playing tennis. Well, in the beginning, it was really, really difficult, right? I was missing the ball. I had a hard time with my toss. It would go into the net, it would go out quite a bit, right? In the early days, it was very, very challenging. But over time and with practice, it started to get easier and easier. I went to summer camps. I just spent the time to do it. And so those parts of my brain started to connect. And then suddenly I was able to be a pretty good tennis player. Well, we know now that the research shows that mindfulness and meditation works in a very similar way. It's like a workout for your mind. And it's the part of our mind that when we practice, mindfulness and meditation isn't so much about trying to stop our thoughts or get rid of them, but rather start to have a different relationship with them. So we start to observe them and just notice them. So the practice, and maybe just to clarify, mindfulness and meditation are often used very interchangeably, and they are very similar. But the way I like to think of it is mindfulness is kind of like a way of being. The definition is a present moment awareness without judgment. So it's being in a mindful way of being. Now, meditation, it's a tool. Like, this is something we actually apply. I mentioned earlier, I sit down and do a guided meditation every morning. Well, there's transcendental meditation, there is awareness meditation, there's insight meditation, there's all these different types that are essentially mindfulness tools that we can then apply. And what I like about it is it allows us to start getting distance from our thoughts and distance from our emotions. So we start to view them as an outside observer, essentially, which, back to the brain, this now creates a part of our brain, new connections that are not in the fight or flight part of our brain, but rather in the more relaxation part of our brain. So then when something, later in the day comes out of left field and smacks you in the face, you can be less reactive because that part of your brain isn't as turned on and wired. You have practiced in the mindfulness and meditation to get distance from things and to start observing things from that kind of outside perspective. So what I noticed, back to your question around the educational component, like, let's understand how this works and why this works. But really, knowledge is of no value unless you put it into practice, right? You could read 100 books about the topic, but until you actually start practicing, you don't know if it works for you. So then going from the learning, the next step is the application, and give it a try. I mean, I like to be a scientist, encourage people to be scientists in their own lives, right? Experiment, see what works for you and what doesn't. And that's completely up to you. And try it on for size. I hate to say, I think about, like, when I was a little kid, it's like, I don't like broccoli. Well, you've never tried it. Why don't you try the broccoli and then tell me, right? And maybe I didn't like it at the beginning, and that's okay, right? But now I eat it and it's all good. So I feel like there's a practice and kind of giving things a try. Like, we know that it helps reduce stress, it boosts your energy, it helps you focus, it helps you sleep better. I mean, there's hundreds of benefits. So as we practice, we start to see, are we feeling any difference around this? And then you can kind of decide for yourself. So I say, don't knock it till you try it.
Do you have a tip for someone who has never done it? It's like a small, easy tip to how they can try it.
Yes. The easiest tip is to not let your mind trick you, meaning you cannot do it wrong. Like, there's no way that you can do it wrong. If you have a seat with the intention to meditate, focus on your breath for just a few minutes. Anytime your mind wanders, you just bring it right back to noticing your breath. That's meditation, right? And so it's the other tip I'll add too, is that it is not about getting rid of your thoughts. As long as you're human and on this planet and walking around breathing, you will always have thoughts, always. So how do we start to observe thoughts as if they're like on a movie screen that are just passing you by? That is meditation. And anytime you get caught up in the story, because as we all do, the minds just start to wander, bring it back to your breath or your point of focus. That's meditation. So it isn't as complicated as we think it is. And I know a lot of people, when they get started, they think that they have to do it right, or they're doing it wrong if they're thinking. No, it's just that diverting the attention back to the breath. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that's super great tip. Because when I was starting it years back, when I was training for my first Ironman, that's when I explored first time meditation. I was always like, oh, I can't switch off my brain. It doesn't work. It does, but it's good to hear that you say it shouldn't be switched off. It's just like, yeah, let it go.
Absolutely. That's it.
It was so hard, I can tell you. And it started with 2 minutes, like super easy 2 minutes. Okay. Just sitting down and trying to let it go, but it wasn't easy.
No, and nothing is when you're first starting, right?
Yeah, I definitely need to get back into that.
Mm-hmm.
So What are different services, different possibilities to engage with you and engage with meditation and mindfulness?
Sure, happy to share. So there's two ways. If you are with a company, organizations who want workshops and those sorts of things, I provide those, and they're available on my site. The other area that's newer and I'm very excited about is to provide these services for individuals. So I have a few different offerings that I would love to share. The first is that I have a masterclass that I'm providing for free, and it's called Meditation Made Easy. So you can visit my site to check out the dates and information there when that goes live. But that one I'm really excited about because we're going to debunk myths. We're going to, learn a little bit more. We're going to practice and even have some tools and skills that you get sent away with that you can start practicing. And with that, I have a free guided meditation that you can download right from my website. That's called How to Boost Your Energy in Less Than 5 Minutes. One of the things that has been really eye-opening for me over the years of this work is that just a few minutes can make a profound difference. I mean, you don't have to sit there for 30 minutes of meditation. I mean, in my workshops, I often ask the question, on a scale of 1 to 10, how stressed are you? And then after the meditation, now how stressed are you? And 95% of the time, everyone's stress reduces to some amount, and many all the way down to 1. It's profound, and it's just a 10-minute meditation. And I found results with just 5 minutes. So it's not a big time commitment. And it's even fun. I really enjoy it. So I like to offer a lot of freebies and downloads on my site. So you can grab a free meditation there. The other thing that I will be offering shortly is a weekly guided meditation during the lunch hour. And this will be lunch hour in California, but just about a 30-minute session. And I call it Renew and Recharge. And so this isn't just another Zoom meeting. This is an opportunity for you to gather with a community of other like minds and drop in and enjoy a light guided meditation with your community. So this is something that I offer weekly. And if it resonates from there, I have a membership program where if you like to come attend every week, it's much more cost effective. Plus you get access to all of the guided meditations that we do during those live sessions, as well as access to an online community of other meditators just like you. One of the challenges that I've been speaking with people over the years about this is they say they have a really hard time making this practice sustainable and having some amount of accountability. So I created the community as a direct solution to that problem around a way to connect with others and hold them accountable to continue, right? Like I heard you say earlier, oh, I need to do it more. Like I hear that a lot, right? We all sort of know we need to, but what's the impetus, right? How do we actually do that? And the community is a wonderful way to have that accountability because you agreed to show up, so you better show up type of thing.
Yeah, it's like going out running with a friend or cycling where he's like, we agreed to meet at 6 o'clock in the morning and I'm waiting in front of your house.
Exactly. Yes, you got it.
Now, it's quite interesting when you mentioned that the time is not important. Paul, who was on my podcast a couple of episodes before you, was saying that he was sitting 2 hours in a jungle listening to the noises going on in the jungle.
Wow.
That's
beautiful.
That's a slightly different experience than 5 minutes. Yeah.
Right. Oh my goodness. That sounds amazing. That's a type of meditation too, right?
Yeah.
And I guess that's another thing that I'll add is anything that one is doing with a present moment awareness is mindfulness, is meditation when we're fully here in the present moment. So it doesn't necessarily mean you've got to be, seated cross-legged on the floor. And, you could be in a jungle, right? You could be sitting on your couch and watching the fire roaring. You could be even watching your children playing, right? Anything we're doing with full present and awareness is where that beauty lies. Yeah.
Would love to transition now to the last part, which is a couple of questions not really connected to what we have discussed so far. So if you could be part or leading a project that is impacting every human being on Earth, What project would it be, and why would you choose that project?
Well, my vision is to see a world where people radiate joy and peace from the inside out. So I would love to work on a project with others that impacts people in that way. I mean, if there's a way to, I think one of my most exciting moments in my career was leading a guided meditation at a conference for 1,500 people and seeing that sea of faces with their eyes closed, like in the middle of a busy conference and day, and just seeing them all they're all amongst one another, but just tapping into their own light and their own joy and their own radiance from the inside out was probably one of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen. So to be able to do that on a massive scale, like imagine the kinds of people we interact with and the kind of decisions that we would all make, and the ideas and the inspiration that would come if folks sort of came from that authentic place within themselves. So that's what I'd love to see.
Well, I will follow you to see that.
It's lofty, I realize this, but anything's possible. And it starts
well, I
with
was about
each
to
of us.
say,
Yes.
just
it starts with from within.
Give it a little bit of try and time, and you will get there. So how do you keep yourself informed? How do you learn? How do you take things in?
Yes. In terms of resources, is that what you mean? Or
yeah, and as well the way how you do it.
Well, I first of all, I'm as a part of my facilitator community. It's called the Calm Monkey, and I love being a part of my certification facilitator group. So a lot of education comes through there. And they did previously have a partnership with the Mindful Leader, although they don't anymore. But that is a wonderful place for information and education that I love to stay on top of the latest trends and information there, and also the latest research. So I find those are great. And in terms of how I like to consume, I know that videos are also becoming a huge way of educating. So more and more I'm checking out videos, especially videos from conference talks, from different events and things like that. So I love to do that, but also reading blogs and a lot of research articles that come out. They can be a little bit heavy, but I love just being on top of the latest research because, for example, some of the latest research that's come out that I was very inspired by was that they've done some studies to see the impact of mindfulness and meditation when it's with a certain type of teacher and if it's live versus recorded. And I'm actually running my own mini research study right now, getting on it. There's something called a heart coherence monitor, and it measures essentially how dropped in you are when you're meditating, if that makes sense. So how, fully present you are. Yeah. And when I do live meditations versus when people do it on their own, they have a higher coherence. So we're actually seeing evidence that shows being a part of a group and doing it in a live setting with specific teachers can be more impactful. So I find that to be extremely empowering. So these are the kinds of things I love learning about and then experimenting with, and then offering things to people that reflect what can make it the easiest for them and the most effective. Yeah.
That's cool. Interesting.
Yeah.
Where will you be in a year from now? And you can take it from a personal level, from a business level, wherever you want, or both.
Sure. Great question. I visualize this in my meditations as well. Where am I going to be in the future, right? What do I want to cultivate? So being that I'm just about to launch some of these services that I mentioned, I see myself fully operating these offerings that I've shared, and that I have my following is getting a lot bigger. So I see more and more people attending the sessions. I see it almost like bringing on a life of its own, where it's all I see it also evolving based on customer feedback, right? So what are people telling me? What do they like and not like? And how are we adjusting and iterating the program to meet their needs? So what that exactly looks like, I don't know yet. And I'm very excited about that because I think it will be very much indicated. I've got these ideas right now, I'm putting it out there, and we'll see what the response is like. So that's what I see on a business level, is just essentially impacting more people and helping them to reduce their stress and anxiety in the business world. And then on a personal level, I see my husband and I being pregnant or possibly having a child at that point. And then I also see us living in a bigger home here in Northern California. So I see us expanding in all areas of our lives.
Nice. Exciting.
Yeah.
How can people find you? How can people reach out to you?
Sure. The best way to find me is on my website, which is www.stacyconlon.com. It's STACYCONLON.com. And you can also find me on Instagram, which is at Stacy_Conlon_. You can also reach out to me on Twitter, or if you want to shoot me an email, I'm always happy to respond. hello@stacyconlon.com.
Yeah. Now we'll put that as well into the show notes so people can straight away click through it.
Great. I would love that. It'd be wonderful to connect.
Awesome. Was a pleasure having you, Stacy. Was a great talk, and really looking forward to see the impact you're doing with mindfulness and meditation. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you, Jens. It was my pleasure.